There are moments that arrive so quietly, you almost do not recognize them as battles. They come through a single sentence in the middle of an ordinary day, a cold remark, a careless judgment, a look that carries more contempt than words, a question that suddenly makes your mind go silent. Nothing dramatic has happened on the outside, yet something inside you tightens. Your breath becomes shorter, your face grows warm, your body prepares to defend itself before your wisdom has entered the room. You want to answer with strength. You want to prove that they are wrong. You want to protect the image of yourself that feels exposed. But when calm would serve you most, your mind becomes empty. And later, when the room is quiet and nobody is watching, the perfect response appears. You replay the scene again and again. You imagine a stronger version of yourself, one who did not freeze, one who did not smile weakly, one who did not let a simple comment pull him away from his center. Yet the moment is already gone. What remains is not only what they said, what remains is the feeling that you abandoned yourself for a few seconds. This is where words become an inner test. Not because every word is true, not because the person speaking has real authority over your life. Words become a test because they reveal where your foundation is, still waiting to be strengthened. One person can throw out a sentence and walk away, but if there is a wound inside you that agrees with it, the sentence will keep living in your mind long after the voice is gone. Someone criticizes one action, and you hear it as a judgment of your entire worth. Someone questions one choice, and you feel as if your whole path has been dismissed. Someone touches one weakness, and suddenly you begin asking whether you are enough. The original sound has already disappeared, but the mind holds it, feeds it, repeats it, adds meaning, and turns a passing moment into a private prison. This is how people lose their freedom without noticing. They think the world has captured them, when in truth, their own reaction has taken the throne. Many people believe strength is the ability to answer quickly, to strike back with a sharp sentence, to make the other person regret speaking. But speed is not always wisdom. A fast reaction often comes from fear wearing the mask of confidence. Real strength is quieter. It does not rush to perform. It does not turn every uncomfortable word into a war for identity. It asks for one breath before it speaks. It notices the heat rising and does not bow to it. It feels the urge to defend and still chooses to see clearly. When someone says something that cuts you, the deepest question is not, how can I defeat them? The deeper question is, who is holding the steering wheel inside me right now? Is it reason or pain? Is it discipline or pride? Is it the person I am becoming or the version of me that still needs approval to feel whole? Calm does not mean you feel nothing. A trained mind is not a stone. Calm means you can feel the sting and still refuse to let it command your mouth. Your posture, your choices, and your day, between the words you hear and the response you give, there is a small space. In that space, your freedom begins. You cannot control every opinion, every tone, every misunderstanding, every person who speaks from confusion, but you can guard the doorway of your attention. You can decide what enters, what passes, and what is not worthy of a home inside you. From now on, when someone says something that disturbs you, do not rush to see it as a fight with them. See it first as a meeting with yourself. Ask what part of me was touched. Ask why this sentence had so much power. Ask whether my next response will come from clarity or from the need to protect a fragile image. A mind without training reacts to every sound. A disciplined mind stands still, observes, breathes, and then chooses. The mountain does not argue with the wind to prove that it is strong. It remains rooted. It lets the wind pass, and in that stillness, its answer is already complete. From that stillness, the first true response begins. I may be wrong. The first response is simple, almost too simple for the ego to accept. I may be wrong. 3 words, but inside them is a form of strength. Most people never train. When someone challenges you, criticizes you, or speaks as if they have seen through you, the old instinct rises quickly. It wants to defend, correct, prove, and protect the image you have built of yourself. But look carefully. What is really being attacked in that moment? Is it truth or is it pride? Many people spend their lives guarding an identity that was never stable to begin with. They want to be seen as smart, respected, mature, capable, and right. The moment another person questions that image, they feel exposed. So they react not because wisdom has spoken, but because fear has touched the surface of pride. I may be wrong, cuts through this pattern. It does not make you weak. It removes the weakness. It tells the other person, and more importantly, it tells yourself that your worth does not depend on being correct in every conversation. A person who needs to be right all the time is easy to control. Challenge the right belief. Question the right decision. Touch the right insecurity. And they will abandon their center to defend themselves. But a person who can calmly say, I may be wrong, cannot be dragged so easily. There is no fragile throne to protect. There is only a commitment to see clearly. This is the beginning of inner freedom. The trained mind does not bow to the first impression. It does not worship its own opinion simply because it arrived first. It pauses and asks, what if there is something here I have not seen yet? That question is not defeat. It is discipline. It is the humility of someone who cares more about reality than reputation. Most arguments become poisonous because people are not searching for truth. They are trying to protect a self-image. They listen only long enough to prepare a counterattack. They hear criticism as humiliation. They treat correction as disrespect. They would rather stay wrong with pride than become wiser with discomfort. But growth has never entered through the door of pride. Growth enters when the mind becomes quiet enough to learn. I may be wrong creates that quiet. It opens a small space where anger was about to take over. It allows the conversation to breathe. It gives reason a chance to return. And sometimes it disarms the other person completely because they expected resistance, not openness. They prepared for a fight, but you chose clarity. Understand this deeply. Saying I may be wrong does not mean accepting false blame. It does not mean becoming small so others can feel powerful. It does not mean surrendering your judgment to anyone who speaks loudly. It means you are strong enough to examine what was said without collapsing inside. You can listen without obeying. You can consider without submitting. You can admit uncertainty without losing dignity. This is a rare kind of strength because it asks you to separate your worth from your opinion. Your opinion can change. Your understanding can deepen. Your perspective can be corrected. None of that makes you less. It makes you awake and capable of growth. The person who cannot be corrected becomes trapped inside yesterday. The person who can be corrected keeps moving toward truth. In real life, this response can change everything. When a coworker challenges your idea, you do not need to defend it like a wounded animal. When someone you love tells you that your behavior hurt them, you do not need to build a wall of explanations. When a critic points towards something uncomfortable, you do not need to attack the critic before examining the point. You can breathe, stand inside yourself, and say, I may be wrong, then watch what happens within you. The fire loses some of its force. The ego has less room to perform. The mind begins to observe instead of react. This is not passive. This is mastery. A warrior of the inner life does not fear correction, because correction is a tool, not a threat. He does not kneel before every opinion, but he also does not worship his own. He understands that truth is not injured when it is examined. Only pride is, and once pride is no longer leading, the next doorway opens, the doorway of silence, where power no longer needs to explain itself. Silence is difficult because it feels, at first, like losing. The ego does not understand silence. It sees an attack and wants movement. It hears disrespect and wants a reply. It feels the heat of humiliation and immediately searches for words that can restore control. But not every moment that invites your voice deserves it. Some words are not spoken to understand you. They are spoken to pull you lower. Some questions are not asked to find truth. They are asked to disturb your balance. Some comments are not criticism. They are bait. And if you answer every bait, you train the world exactly how to reach you. Silence breaks that training. It says nothing, yet it reveals a boundary. It shows that you are not available for every emotional transaction placed in front of you. When someone tries to provoke you, they are often not seeking a real conversation. They are seeking your energy. They want your anger, your panic, your explanation, your trembling need to be understood. They want to watch you leave your center and enter their storm. The moment you rush to defend yourself, you may believe you are taking power back, but many times you are handing it over. You are showing them where the door is. You are proving that their words can move your inner state. A disciplined silence does something different. It starves the attack. It gives no fuel to the fire. It allows the noise outside you to reveal itself without becoming noise inside you. This kind of silence is not weakness. It is not fear. It is not the frozen silence of someone who has no answer. It is the chosen silence of someone who has examined the moment and found that peace is more valuable than performance. There is a great difference between being unable to speak and choosing not to. One comes from fear, the other comes from mastery. The person who is unable to speak feels trapped by the situation. The person who chooses silence stands above the situation long enough to decide whether it is worth entering. That space changes everything. In that space, you begin to see the hidden cost of reacting. You see how one sentence can become 10 more. You see how a small insult can become a long argument. You see how the desire to prove your dignity can sometimes make you behave without dignity. Silence protects you from that fall. It gives your deeper self time to arrive before your wounded self takes the stage. In daily life, this is one of the hardest practices. Someone interrupts you with contempt, and your body wants to strike back. Someone dismisses your work, and your mind prepares a defense. Someone speaks to you with arrogance, and every old wound begins to rise. But right there, in the first few seconds, there is a gate. If you step through it unconsciously, You become part of the energy. If you stand still, breathe, and let the moment pass through awareness, you remain free. The silence does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be cold. It does not need to punish. It can be calm, clean, brief, and complete. A pause, a steady look, a breath. Sometimes that is enough to remind both you and the other person that you are not controlled by the pressure of the moment. The world is full of people who mistake reaction for strength. They believe power is always loud, always fast, always ready to answer. But the deepest strength often has no need to announce itself. A mountain does not explain why it remains still. A flame does not argue with the darkness. A rooted person does not rush to prove that he has roots. He simply does not move for every passing wind. Silence teaches you to stop spending your life explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It teaches you to conserve energy for what is worthy. It teaches you that not every accusation deserves a courtroom. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every disturbance deserves your nervous system. And when silence is chosen from clarity, not resentment, it becomes one of the cleanest forms of power. From that power, you begin to hear without absorbing, to witness without surrendering, to stand in the presence of another person's opinion without turning it into your identity. That is where the next response becomes possible. That is an interesting perspective. These words look simple, but they carry a quiet discipline. After silence has protected your center, this response allows you to return to the conversation without surrendering your inner ground. It is not agreement. It is not defeat. It is not a polite way of pretending that another person is right. It is the language of someone who can hear an opinion without becoming possessed by it. Many people do not know how to listen without absorbing. They hear anger and become angry. They hear judgment and become defensive. They hear fear and begin to doubt themselves. Their nervous system opens the door to every emotion in the room. And before they notice it, they are no longer responding from their own clarity. They are reacting from the emotional weather of someone else. This is why the phrase, "that is an interesting perspective," has power. It creates space. It allows you to acknowledge that a viewpoint exists without making that viewpoint your master. You are saying, "I have heard you. I recognize that this is how you see it. But I do not need to carry your interpretation inside my body." There is wisdom in that distance. Without distance, every conversation becomes a battlefield. Every opinion feels like a threat. Every disagreement becomes personal. A person says, "You are too quiet," and you begin questioning your confidence. Another says, "You are too ambitious," and you begin shrinking your dreams. Someone calls you difficult, sensitive, selfish, cold, slow, intense. And suddenly you start measuring yourself through a mirror they placed in front of you. But not every mirror reflects truth. Some mirrors are shaped by fear. Some are clouded by envy. Some are cracked by pain that belongs to the person holding them. If you accept every reflection, you will spend your life changing shape for people who have not even examined their own eyes. That is why you must learn to observe without immediately accepting. When you say, "that is an interesting perspective," you give yourself a moment to study the statement. Where did it come from? What emotion is behind it? Is there truth inside it? Is it useful? Is it projection? Is it a wound speaking through another mouth? You do not reject too quickly, because pride can make you blind. You do not accept too quickly, because insecurity can make you obedient. You stand in the middle, awake enough to examine, stable enough not to be swallowed. This is a rare place to stand. Most people swing between two extremes. They either fight every opinion or they absorb every opinion. One makes them harsh, the other makes them fragile. The disciplined person learns a third way. He listens with respect, but he keeps ownership of his inner state. He can be curious without being controlled. He can be open without being invaded. He can hear something uncomfortable and still remain rooted in his own breath. In real life, this response can soften tension without weakening your position. When someone at work dismisses your idea, you do not need to strike back immediately. You can say, "That is an interesting perspective," and let the room breathe. When a family member judges your choices, you do not need to explain your entire life to earn permission. You can acknowledge their view without handing them authority over your path. When a stranger online throws a harsh opinion into your day, you do not need to open your soul to someone who has no responsibility for your future. You can see the comment, name it as a perspective, and let it pass through awareness. This is not emotional distance in the cold sense. It is emotional hygiene. You do not let every passing voice leave footprints across the floor of your mind. You clean the entrance. You decide what belongs. The more you practice this, the less frightened you become by disagreement. You stop needing everyone to see what you see. You stop needing every conversation to confirm your identity. You become strong enough to let another person have a view, even a wrong view, without feeling forced to repair it immediately. That is maturity. That is freedom. And from that freedom, a deeper patience becomes possible, because once you can hear without absorbing, you can also pause without panic. You can let reason take its rightful place before the mouth moves. That is where the next response begins. Let me think about that. Let me think about that. In a world addicted to speed, these words feel almost rebellious. People want instant answers, instant opinion, instant réaction, as if the fastest response must be the strongest one. But speed is not always strength. Many fast answers are only fear moving quickly. Many sharp replies are only pride trying to protect itself before wisdom has arrived. When someone challenges you, accuses you, questions your choice, or puts pressure on you in front of others, the body wants to react before the mind has understood. The heart speeds up, the breath becomes tight, the mouth prepares to defend, and the old self steps forward with armor in its hands. But the disciplined person knows something deeper. Not every question deserves an immediate answer. Not every accusation needs to be answered in the same emotional temperature in which it was delivered. Not every moment of pressure is asking for performance. Some moments are asking for pause. Let me think about that. Creates a sacred pause. It gives reason enough room to enter. It tells the ego to sit down for a moment. It tells the wound to stop reaching for the microphone. It tells the nervous system that there is no emergency inside a conversation. This is not avoidance. This is not weakness. This is the refusal to let urgency become your master. The person who cannot pause is easily controlled by the person who creates pressure. If someone can rush you, they can shape you. If someone can make you answer before you are clear, they can pull you into mistakes that do not belong to your true character. A hurried mind often speaks from the shallowest part of itself. It says too much, promises too quickly, attacks too soon, agrees before it has examined, rejects before it has understood. Then later, when the heat fades, it has to live with the consequences of words spoken from disorder. Let me think about that protects you from becoming a prisoner of one untrained moment. It returns authority to the deeper part of you. It says, I respect this enough to consider it, but I respect myself enough not to react blindly. There is dignity in that. A mature mind does not confuse delay with defeat. It understands that some truths need space to become visible. Sometimes a criticism hurts because it is false. Sometimes it hurts because it is partly true. Sometimes it comes wrapped in poor delivery. But hidden inside it is something you need to see. If you react too quickly, you may throw away the lesson because you dislike the tone. If you pause, you can separate the message from the messenger, the truth from the emotion, the useful from the unnecessary. This is how wisdom works. It does not swallow everything. It does not reject everything. It studies, it listens, it waits for the water to become still enough to see the bottom. In daily life, this response can save your peace many times. When a colleague challenges your idea in a meeting, you do not have to defend it like a threatened animal. You can say, let me think about that, and allow the room to move from heat to clarity. When someone you love tells you something difficult, you do not have to turn the conversation into a courtroom. You can give their words enough respect to examine them slowly. When a person tries to corner you with pressure, you can refuse the pace they are trying to impose. You can slow the moment down. You can breathe. You can choose the ground on which you will stand. The world will often reward noise before it recognizes wisdom. It will mistake hesitation for uncertainty, stillness for weakness, patience for lack of power. Do not be fooled by that. A sword drawn too quickly may wound the wrong thing. A word released too quickly may damage what silence could have preserved. The trained person is not afraid of the space before an answer. He knows that in that space, the mind gathers itself. In that space, emotions lose their first authority. In that space, the next action becomes cleaner. Let me think about that. Is the voice of someone who is no longer enslaved by pressure. It is the sound of a person choosing truth over speed, clarity over performance, discipline over impulse. And when you have given yourself enough space to think, another door opens. You may discover that the other person is not entirely wrong. You may discover that your first defense was not the whole truth. From that honesty, the next response becomes possible. You might be right. You might be right. This response asks for deeper courage than most people expect. It is easy to reject what hurts. It is easy to call every criticism unfair, every disagreement ignorance, every uncomfortable mirror an attack. But a mind that only protects itself can never fully grow. Sometimes another person sees a part of you that you have avoided. Sometimes the thing you resist hearing is not completely false. Sometimes the truth arrives through a voice you do not like, in a tone you would not choose, at the moment you were not ready for. The disciplined person does not worship the messenger, but he does not throw away the message too quickly. He pauses long enough to ask, is there something here that can sharpen me? You might be right does not mean you surrender your judgment. It does not mean the other person owns the truth. It does not mean their accusation is pure, their motive is clean, or their view is complete. It means you are strong enough to let reality correct you if correction is needed. This is rare strength. Many people would rather defend an old version of themselves than meet the truth that could free them. They confuse correction with humiliation. They hear, "You could improve," and translate it into, "You are not enough." But growth does not speak to your worth. Growth speaks to your direction. To admit that someone might be right is not to become smaller. It is to stop kneeling before the need to appear flawless. The person who must always look correct becomes a servant of appearance. The person who can learn becomes a servant of truth. And truth, even when it stings, is a cleaner master than pride. Yet openness must be balanced with discernment. This is why the second response belongs beside the first. This does not require my reaction. There are moments when the right response is humility, and there are moments when the right response is withdrawal. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Not every word deserves examination. Not every opinion is a lesson. Not every attack carries hidden truth. Some people are not offering feedback. They are seeking control. Some comments are not mirrors. They are hooks. Some conversations are not doors to growth. They are rooms designed to drain you. A mature person does not accept every burden just because someone places it at his feet. He asks, "Is this mine to carry?" He asks, "Will reacting serve what I am becoming?" He asks, "Will this matter in 60 days? Or is my ego demanding victory in the next 60 seconds?" That question can save your peace. So much damage is done by people who win the moment and lose the path. They answer too sharply. They prove too loudly. They defend too long. And later they realize that the conversation was never worthy of their energy. This does not require my reaction, returns you to the longer view. It reminds you that you are not obligated to attend every argument you are invited to. You are not required to explain yourself to every person who misunderstands you. You do not need to answer every tone, every accusation, every sarcastic remark, every emotional trap. Your attention is not a public resource. Your nervous system is not a battlefield for strangers, critics, or wounded people looking for somewhere to place their pain. In daily life, these two responses work like two hands of the same discipline. You might be right. Keeps you humble enough to learn. This does not require my reaction. Keeps you wise enough to protect your energy. Without the first, you become defensive and closed. Without the second, you become available to every disturbance. Together, they teach you to choose truth and choose your battles. When a loved one speaks with pain, you may need to listen. When a mentor challenges your weakness, you may need to grow. When a jealous person tries to provoke you, you may need to remain silent and continue walking. When a stranger online throws judgment into your day, you may need to let it pass without giving it a home. This is not coldness. This is clarity. A trained mind is not soft clay for every hand that touches it. It is also not stone that refuses all shaping. It is more like a blade in the hands of a master, able to be sharpened, but not bent by every strike. The deeper you grow, the less you react from fear, and the more you respond from purpose. You stop asking, "How do I win this exchange?" You begin asking, "What does this moment require from the person I am becoming?" Sometimes it requires openness. Sometimes it requires restraint. Sometimes it requires no movement at all. And when you can stand there, humble enough to receive truth, strong enough to refuse noise, you become ready for the final response, the one that turns even difficult words into material for your growth. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for telling me. These words are difficult because they ask the ego to do something it does not want to do. They ask it to stay open when it wants to close. They ask it to listen when it wants to defend. They ask it to receive something uncomfortable without immediately turning it into a war. This is why the final response is not just a phrase. It is a sign of inner maturity. Anyone can thank someone for praise. Anyone can smile when the words feel kind. But to receive a difficult truth, a criticism, a correction, or even a harsh observation without collapsing into anger, that requires a different level of strength. Thank you for telling me does not mean every word spoken to you is true. It does not mean the other person was wise, fair, respectful, or complete in their understanding. It means you are no longer so fragile that discomfort must become defense. You can take what was said, hold it in awareness, and examine it without letting it poison your center. This is how painful words become material for growth. Many people waste their lives rejecting every mirror that does not flatter them. They call it confidence, but often it is fear wearing armor. They want encouragement, but they avoid correction. They want success, but they resist the information that would make them better. They want peace, but they keep protecting the same wounds that